morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important announcement. Bon matin tout le monde. Merci pour avoir nous joindre à nous pour cette annonce importante. We will begin with a few opening remarks from the Honorable Marco Mendicino, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. On va commencer avec quelques mots d'ouverture de l'Honorable Marco Mendicino, ministre de l'Immigration, des Réfugiés et de la Citoyenneté. Minister, allez-y.
Good morning. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and the Anishinaabe people. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome my colleagues MPs Asasi, Jawari, and Dong, who are joining us virtually. This past year has been a challenging one for Canada, but it is difficult to sufficiently express the profound sense of loss and outrage in the downing of Flight PS 752, which took 176 innocent lives, including 138 with ties to Canada. At the center of this national tragedy are the surviving families of the victims. I want to acknowledge the families of the victims of Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752. Your pain and loss is unimaginable, and we offer our deepest sympathies to you today. From the beginning, Canada has called for the Iranian regime to conduct a comprehensive and transparent investigation in accordance with international standards. In furtherance of demanding accountability, our former colleague and Canada's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Ralph Goodale, published an extensive report in his capacity as a special advisor to the government. The report makes clear that Canada remains deeply concerned about the lack of transparency, evidence, and information from the Iranian regime to explain what happened. I want to make clear we will not rest until the families get the justice and the accountability they deserve. Last January, on Canada's inaugural National Day of Remembrance for Victims of Air Disasters, the Prime Minister affirmed the government's commitment to supporting families of the Canadian citizens and permanent resident victims of Ukrainian International Airlines Flight 752 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. I have had the privilege of speaking with some of the families who are related to the victims of Flight PS 752. The grief and anguish is real and ongoing. And they tell their stories, and they described how their loved ones are now gone. And they mourn the loss of them, whose lives were so cruelly taken. And the families are in pain, and they still ask questions. As Ambassador Goodale said in his report, they yearn for the truth. All of that is powerful motivation for Canadians to remain dogged and unrelenting in our search for the transparency, accountability, and justice the families need and deserve. Today, the government is taking a step to help heal some of those wounds. Effective yesterday, my department, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, has put into place a policy to offer a pathway to permanent residence for in-Canada families of Canadian victims of the air disasters PS 752 and ET 302. The public policy will remain in effect until May 11 of next year. Today's announcement provides a pathway to permanent residency to a group of people whose loved ones made this great country their home before being so suddenly and cruelly taken. L'annonce aujourd'hui vise à fournir une voie vers la résidence permanente pour un groupe de personnes dont les proches ont fait de notre pays leur nouvelle terre d'accueil avant d'être importés si soudainement et cruellement. La présente politique d'intérêt public vise à donner aux membres de la famille des victimes l'occasion d'avoir la même expérience d'une vie au Canada. To be eligible to apply for permanent residency under this public policy, applicants must be a relative of a victim of Flight ET302 or PS752 who was either a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident of Canada, or a foreign national who had a positive eligibility decision on their permanent residence application at the time of the disaster. In this case, a relative could be a spouse, common law partner, child, grandchild, mother, father, grandmother or grandfather, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, niece, or nephew. Additionally, applicants must be in Canada when they apply. Most applicants who made a refugee claim after these two disasters took place will be eligible. Les demandeurs doivent déterminer s'ils sont admissibles et ensuite lire attentivement les instructions sur la façon de présenter une demande avant de créer et de soumettre une demande. Tous les frais et les exigences en matière de données biométriques habituelles s'appliquent. Also, other admissibility requirements will apply. However, applicants may still be eligible even if they have entered Canada without the required visa or other documents, failed to comply with certain conditions or their temporary stay, or have worked or studied without being authorized to do so under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. To the family members of those Canadian citizens and permanent residents who lost their lives so tragically in flights PS752, ET and ET302, we hope this pathway is a meaningful and positive opportunity as you continue to heal. And in closing, and before I turn over to my colleague, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of a number of my colleagues, including, as I said, Ambassador Goodale, Ministers Champagne, Blair, Algabra, Garneau, and Minister Wilkinson, all of whom have played a very important effort, as have my colleagues who are joining us today virtually, as I said, MPs Sassi and Dong and Jawari, all of whom are members of the community representing a large constituency, and I'm very grateful to them for their advocacy in taking a meaningful step forward towards achieving justice for the families, which of course are our main focus. And with that, I will turn it over to MP Sassi. Merci.
Thank you very, very much for those beautiful remarks, Minister Mendicino. As you indicated, since this tragedy occurred, the relatives of those who were lost yearn for the truth. And I think it would be fair to say that our government has yearned to not only assist them, but to be there for them. So I would like to acknowledge all of the work that has gone into this file since this tragedy struck, starting from the Prime Minister, who has been engaged since day one, Minister Garneau, Minister Algabra, Minister Goodale, and you, Minister, if I may say so, have truly been steadfast since the first hours after this tragedy struck. We all need to acknowledge and accept the tremendous work that public servants across our government were there to provide comfort to the best that we possibly could. The individuals we lost were individuals that blessed our communities from coast to coast to coast. And we all recall that at the time, we vowed that they would never be forgotten and that they would be etched in our hearts. And therefore, I can think of no better initiative to ensure that their legacies endure. It has been a difficult 15 months, but this is a very significant milestone. At the time, as a country, we grieve together, but today we embrace and we welcome their loved ones with open arms. So I thank everyone within our government who has been part of this effort, in particular, Minister Mendicino, you have really, truly been tireless from the start. But this is an important step, but we will continue to be there for the relatives, and we will be there until there is full accountability and justice. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Asasi, and to our other colleagues. And I believe now we will take some questions.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, MP Asasi. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci, Monsieur Asasi. En passant maintenant à la période de questions, we will now begin the press conference portion of the event. We will now go to the phone operator. En passant maintenant au téléphone opérateur.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star one at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. The first question is from Kevin Gallagher from CTV National News. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for taking our questions. Minister Mendicino, how many family members of the victims of these crashes will be getting permanent residency, and when will they be coming to Canada?
Well, thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned during my remarks, we just launched the program yesterday. There is a portal on our website which will allow those who were eligible under the program to apply. I think it is too early to say precisely how many families would be accepted under this program. But what I will underline and emphasize is that throughout the course of our work as a government in taking a meaningful step towards achieving accountability, but also giving the opportunity for the families to begin the long journey of healing, what we heard is that loved ones who had initially come to Canada to grieve with their relatives perhaps would want to stay. And we believe that by introducing this public policy, that we are demonstrating solidarity with the families in their efforts to seek justice, and we're also demonstrating compassion at a time that has been extraordinarily difficult. And some of the conversations that I had with those families who lost loved ones on PS 752 were among the most difficult that I have ever had to engage in as a representative of my community. That this policy is a truly a demonstration of our government's commitment to show solidarity with the families by allowing them to reunite with their loved ones here. And that is precisely what this pathway will help accomplish.
Follow up?
I'd like to thanks. Sorry, I will follow up. Yes. I'd like to ask maybe a broader question on your mandate. Obviously, there's concern from opposition parties and immigration groups about Canada meeting its immigration targets for 2021, more than 401,000 new welcoming new residents here in Canada. So there's some thought, like how much would this program perhaps add to that number, but also the new pathway that you created for essential workers, healthcare workers, and students already here in Canada. Is there a possibility that that will also be opened up to a broader section of people who are already here for immigration?
Well, the pathway for essential workers, which would welcome 90,000 new essential workers who are already in Canada, has taken off. We have already reached our cap of the 40,000 eligible spaces for recent international student graduates. These are young, hardworking, and talented individuals who are already in Canada, graduated within the last 4 years, who are already contributing. We are seeing the other two pathways under this initiative fill up quickly, and I believe that it truly reflects the informed choice that we made to launch this program in the first place. There's no doubt that we still find ourselves in the midst of this pandemic, and that has obvious impacts on the ability for travel. But in the meantime, we remain squarely focused on achieving our immigration targets for 2021, which are about accelerating our economic recovery. And when you look at the individuals who are applying to this essential workers pathway, these are precisely the types of newcomers that we want to stay. They're working in our hospitals, in our long-term care homes as caregivers. They're providing reinforcements to the front lines. They are young individuals who have graduated from recognized Canadian institutions, and they have a lot to offer. And by offering them a pathway to stay in Canada, we are accelerating our economic recovery, and equally, we are addressing the long-term demographic challenges that Canada is faced with as a result of our aging population. And we'll continue to be very focused on achieving our goals going forward.
Thank you, Minister. Merci, Ministre. On passera maintenant aux prochaines questions. We'll now go to the next question. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Ashley Burt from CBC National News. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my question. Minister Mendicino, there's a family that fled Iran over concerns for their safety. They faced threats, intimidation, and have said that they were scared for their lives. Their son was going to study here in Canada, but died in the flight. That is their only connection to this country. They are in Edmonton right now. It doesn't appear that they would qualify based on what you just laid out in terms of eligibility, since he was a student, not a permanent resident. Will there be exceptions for families like this? And if not, what do you say to this family today?
Well, first, what I would say is that any violation of human rights is unacceptable. And that is why we continue to defend and uphold human rights around the world by having a robust asylum system. I would point out that for the last 3 years now, Canada has been the #1 resettling country when it comes to refugees. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, a friend of mine, Filippo Grande, has characterized Canada as being a bright light in a very dark and horrible year, and that was last year. We believe that it is important to continue to resettle the most urgent cases. We are continuing with that work despite the complexities of international travel as a result of the pandemic. And I would also point out that here on Canadian soil, we have been very innovative in looking at ways to provide pathways for asylum seekers who have contributed in the midst of the pandemic. The Guardian Angels pathway was an initiative that I introduced over the course of the last number of months to recognize the contributions of those who had flown and sought refuge from persecution and from conflict. And as a result of that program, they now have the chance to stay. We also introduced a policy change to the pathway that we created for survivors of Daesh by expanding the definition of family to allow more Yazidi refugees to be reunited with their loved ones. So we will continue to look at ways to uphold human rights by offering pathways to the world's most vulnerable. And that is work that we are committed to doing.
And Minister, you began the online citizenship test program at the end of November. What do you have to say to those who are still waiting to get an invitation?
I would say keep the faith. More digital testing and citizenship ceremonies are coming to you very soon. And again, this is another way in which my department and our public servants have done extraordinary work to pivot from what have been conventionally in-person ceremonies, very special ceremonies, among the most unique and personal functions that this office gets to exercise, is to welcome those newcomers who've arrived in Canada and want to start their next chapter of their lives here in person into a digital space. And in my experience, it is no less profound to be able to still connect. And by leveraging technology, we are going to be able to continue to grow our Canadian family. And that is important. It's important for the newcomers. It's important for the communities in which they live. It's important for our long-term prosperity. And there's a lot more work there to do.
Thank you, Ashley. Merci, Ashley. On passera maintenant aux prochaines questions. We'll now go to the next question. Operator.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question est de Geneviève Normand, CBC Radio-Canada. La parole est à vous.
Oui, merci de prendre ma question. Bonjour, Monsieur le ministre. Aujourd'hui, comme vous le savez sans doute, l'Assemblée nationale du Québec va déposer son projet de loi pour réformer la loi 101 sur le français. Alors, je me demandais si vous étiez d'accord à ce que la loi soit renforcée.
Écoute, notre gouvernement est un grand défendeur les deux langues officielles et particulièrement le fait français. Ça, c'est le travail que j'appuie comme un vrai francophile, mais même en mon capacité comme ministre d'un département qui met beaucoup de focus d'attirer des immigrants qui parlent français. Il y a beaucoup d'exemples, mais plus récemment, nous avons lancé et mis sur le terrain une initiative pour attirer des immigrants qui parlent français dans le contexte de le parcours qui était créé pour les travailleurs essentiels. Et cette initiative avait aucun de cap dans ce parcours. Donc, ça, c'est, je pense, un incentive qui démontrait notre dévouement de continuer de renforcer les communautés francophones, pas seulement au Québec, mais partout au Canada.
Donc, si je comprends bien, vous semblez être en faveur, en tout cas, d'un renforcement de la loi 101. Est-ce que c'est bien ça que je comprends? Et si oui, est-ce que ça ne vous rend pas inquiet pour les futurs immigrants qui voudraient, par exemple, s'installer au Québec? Et là, quand je dis futurs immigrants, je ne parle pas évidemment seulement des immigrants francophones.
Écoute, notre gouvernement croit dans le fait français. Nous avons beaucoup des exemples de le dévouement à cette valeur. Ce n'est pas seulement mon travail dans le département d'immigration, c'est même le travail de ma collègue, la ministre Joly, qui avait embarqué sur un projet très important dans le contexte de la modernisation de les deux langues, de la modernisation de la loi de les deux langues officielles. Et je pense qu'il y a une opportunité pour nous deux de collaborer dans ce projet de loi. Elle avait lancé un papier blanc. Et moi, mon focus est d'explorer la possibilité de créer une nouvelle initiative d'attirer plus de professeurs qui parlent français. Donc, ça c'est une autre façon de renforcer le fait français, pas seulement au Québec, mais partout au Canada.
Merci. Thank you. We'll now go to the next question. On passera maintenant aux prochaines questions. Opérateur.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Ms. Mohadi from Ukraine International. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. So people who are in Iran and are relatives of the victims of flight PS-752, it's not easy for them to seek justice, and nor is the visa process to enter Canada. Is there anything that's being done for the families who are still in Iran and try to seek justice, but they can't because of fear for their families and loved ones in Iran, so they can come to Canada before applying for immigration?
Yes, you raise a very important question there. And what I would say to those who are abroad is that we are actively looking at that issue. And we'll have more to say on the opportunity for those who are abroad who would otherwise be eligible if they were in Canada, as long as they met the definition of family that we have set out in our policy. And stay tuned for more on that.
Thank you.
Follow-up?
Thank you.
Okay. We'll now go to our final question. Nous passons maintenant à notre question finale. Opérateur.
Thank you. Merci. The last question is from Mon Hanin from Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Morning, Minister Mendicino. I want to ask you about the admissibility requirements. According to what you said in your opening remarks, it seems that internationals, like those who were Iranian citizens or who were in Canada when the disaster happened, who are related or family members of Iranian international students who won't be eligible to apply under this program. Why is that? Why did you make that decision? And are you considering like maybe expanding the program in the future to allow these to apply for permanent residency as well?
I'm sorry, Mon. It was a bit difficult to hear part of your question. Would you mind repeating it again?
Yes. Yes. I'm asking about family members of Iranian international students in Canada who died during in that disaster. And according to what you said, it seems they won't be eligible to apply under this program for permanent residency. So I'm wondering why that decision was made to exclude the family members of Iranian international students who died in that disaster, and what are you planning to do to maybe give them a pathway to stay in Canada?
Thank you for repeating it, and I think I understand the question now. I would begin by pointing out that there are a number of pathways for international students to come to Canada. That is work that we have done very closely in conjunction with provincial governments, and there is a corridor there that is backed by rigorous health protocols. And those who are already in Canada, these are the recent international student graduates who would be eligible under the essential workers pathway that we recently announced, certainly do have now a fast pathway to stay in Canada. It is our view that this will be good for them. It will be good for the communities in which they live. It will be good for the many vital sectors in which they are already supporting on the strength of the education which they received in Canada. And if deemed eligible and accepted under this program, they will also have the ability to sponsor their families, as would any other permanent resident, successful permanent resident applicant in Canada. So there is a pathway there for international student graduates to have an opportunity to stay in Canada under the essential workers pathway, as well as to sponsor families. What the public policy that we launched yesterday does is it looks at this through the lens of achieving justice and accountability for the families by demonstrating compassion and by recognizing that in addition to the pandemic, that the profound sense of grief and loss and tragedy that has been felt by families is a compelling reason to allow for those with family relationships to the victims of Flight PS752 and ES302 to be reunited in Canada with permanent residency status. So there are a number of pathways which we believe does allow us to both achieve our immigration goals, to achieve our economic goals, but also to show compassion as well.
Thank you. You mentioned during your opening remark too that those who made refugee claim to stay in Canada, members of the families of the two air disasters, they would be eligible to apply under this program. Should they would be asked to apply for this program, or their refugee claim application would be turned to a permanent residency application?
Well, that's a really important question, because as we heard one of your colleagues ask, there are some who have had to flee the jurisdiction as a result of conflict and persecution. And Canada has a world-renowned reputation as having a robust asylum system to offer those sanctuary, those who should be offered status. And we have an independent tribunal that adjudicates those claims. So certainly those who feel as though they have a claim with merit should make those claims before the appropriate body, which is the Immigration, Refugee, and Tribunal Board. The other thing I would say is that does not preclude those individuals from applying under this program, as long as they meet the eligibility requirements as set out on our website very clearly, and my department remains ready to support those as they navigate that process. But today really is about the families. This, as you heard my colleague MP Assassi, has been an exceedingly difficult year and a half. And, it's hard to think back to a time before the pandemic, but when this tragedy struck at the very beginning of January 2020, it was a moment that caused tremendous shock. And as a country, we grieved, and we continue to grieve with the families. And that pain is still very real. But today is about helping the families continue on their journey towards healing, a journey that will take, no doubt, a very long time. But we hope that with this pathway and with an opportunity for more families to be reunited by showing that compassion, that we are really demonstrating our commitment to the families to achieve justice, the justice they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. Merci à tous qui nous joignent à nous aujourd'hui. This now concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you. Merci. The conference has now ended. La conférence est maintenant terminée.